We all know that PowerPoint is a visual medium and that we should not overrun our slides with too much text. But because I want to walk you through a speech analysis, I'm going to put the text of a speech on the screen and discuss it as we go. The speech I would like to analyze appears in the appendix of your textbook. It's called the New Madrid Earthquake Area. While the title of the speech does not tell the audience exactly what the speech is going to be about, it does not have any sort of creative flair. As you select a topic for your own speech, make sure that your title is both informative and creative. Let's begin with the speech's introduction, which we will discuss paragraph by paragraph. How many of you can remember what you were doing around 7 o'clock in the morning on October 17th? If you're a sports fan like me, you probably had set out the munchies, popped a cold one, and settled back to watch San Francisco and Oakland battle it out in the World Series. Since the show came on at 7 o'clock here in Memphis for its pregame hype, you may not have been paying close attention to the TV. Until both the sound and power went out because of the Bay Area earthquake. This opening paragraph is where the speaker captures the audience's attention. Notice that he uses an embedded narrative to begin the speech, and that it is a combination of a hypothetical and a real and a vicarious narrative. It is loosely based on his own experience, as representative of other fans' experiences, and asks the audience to move along with him. At the very end of this paragraph, he reveals his topic, earthquakes, although it's not exactly clear what earthquake he's talking about. The Bay Area earthquake occurred in 1989, and normally the speaker would give the exact date. This speech, though, has been edited for inclusion in a textbook, and it's in the author's best interest to remove dates because they make the speech sound too old, forcing the author to collect new speeches for every edition of the book. Let's go on to the next paragraph. If you're like me, you probably sat glued to the TV for the rest of the evening, watching the live coverage of the catastrophe. If you're like me, you probably started thinking that Memphis, Tennessee is in the middle of the New Madrid earthquake area, and wondering how likely it would be for a large earthquake to hit here. And if you're like me, you probably asked yourself, what would I do if a large earthquake hit here? This paragraph serves one important function and begins another. First, it completely reveals the speaker's topic. We no longer have to guess which earthquake he's talking about because he's talking about the likelihood of the New Madrid area being hit by an earthquake. If he does his job correctly, he'll tell us exactly what the speech will be about in the next paragraph. This paragraph also begins to establish the speaker's credibility. Although he has not yet told us exactly why he is qualified to speak on this topic, he has begun to identify with his audience. Identification is a good way to build credibility, because if you can prove how much you are like your audience, they will trust you. After all, we want to like and trust people like ourselves because we like and trust ourselves, right? If you need to pause the recording so that you can read the words on the screen, I suggest that you do so. But I don't think I'll continue to read the entire speech aloud because I want to save our time together for the analysis. Now, this paragraph does two important things. First of all, it finishes establishing the speaker's credibility. To do this, the speaker states what research he has conducted. This is an excellent way to discuss credibility. Just come right out and tell the audience why you were qualified to speak on the topic at hand. Note that he also cites an expert, Dr. Arch Johnson, the director of the on-campus earthquake center. So notice that he states the author's expert's prestige. He's head of the Center for Earthquake Research and Information. This is an excellent way to deal with credibility in your introduction, to borrow the credibility of an expert. The second major thing that happens in this paragraph is that the speaker previews the main points of the speech. He lays out 4 main points very clearly: the history of the area, the likelihood of an earthquake, how an earthquake could affect the area, and how to be prepared for the earthquake. We can tell from looking at these main points that the speaker is organizing the speech categorically because each main point deals with a new category of information. At the beginning of this paragraph, which marks the beginning of main point 1, the speaker does a nice job of directing his audience toward the organization of the speech by letting them know it's time to start. This is a clear sign that the speech is moving into the first main point. As promised, This main point deals with the history of the area. As the main point unfolds, we can see the beginning of a narrative. You may remember from our discussion of narratives, they can be embedded, vicarious, or master narratives. Master narratives extend throughout a speech. Will this story of the New Madrid area be a simple embedded narrative, or will the speaker extend it throughout the speech? We'll have to see. Note also that the speaker uses statistics very well in this paragraph, and he translates them into terms that the audience can understand by comparing the magnitude of the earthquake in terms that the audience might be familiar with. Again, in main point 1, we see the narrative extending into this paragraph. Note the speaker's use of the term Indian instead of Native American. What do you think about the use of that term? Is it okay to use an outdated term just because it's historically accurate? Would a more current term like Native American be better for this class given our explicit focus on social and cultural diversity? Think carefully about the terms you use in your speech and how different audiences might hear them. This paragraph is remarkable also for its use of concrete details. The speaker uses vivid language to recreate the scene of the earthquake and help give the audience a virtual experience. Note, too, that the speaker is really committed to tailoring the speech to his audience. He repeatedly discusses Memphis in an attempt to have an effect on his immediate audience, who are students at the University of Memphis. Note the way the speaker links this paragraph to the one that came before it by using Memphis in the last line and then again in the first line of the next paragraph. In this paragraph, the speaker introduces a bit of supporting material. He cites an expert of earthquake research when he relates statistics about the number of earthquakes in the New Madrid area. In this paragraph, however, the speaker does not translate the statistics into terms the audience can relate to. What do you think about this? Do you think the speaker should always relate statistics to the audience? In this paragraph, the speaker does a good job of relating technical information to the audience without using a lot of jargon and technical language. He does, however, use the term alluvial to describe the soil. Alluvial means loose, and to be honest, I had to Google this word before I understood it. It may have been in the speaker's best interest to use the word loose from the very beginning to alleviate any confusion. It's also not completely clear, but this paragraph serves as a subtle transition from the first point about the history of the area into the second main point about the likelihood of an earthquake in the New Madrid area. While the speech certainly flows together well, for this class, we would have been expecting the speaker to say something like, "Now that I have described the history of the New Madrid area, let me tell you about what future earthquakes might do to the region." What do you think? Do you prefer a more subtle organizational style? Or would you like the speaker to be more direct about the main points of the speech? Now we've moved on to main point 2, the likelihood of an earthquake. The reason this paragraph sounds a little awkward is because the speaker uses too many numbers, and he does not translate them into terms that the audience can understand. It would be nice if the speaker had added a line saying something like, "People in Memphis are more likely to see a massive earthquake than they are to be victims of a tornado." A sentence like this, if accurate and supported by evidence, would give the audience something to compare their earthquake risk to. Now the speaker has moved on into main point 3. He shifted again without an obvious transition. This time, he's moving from the second main point into the third one, where he's going to discuss the potential effects of an earthquake on the city of Memphis. Once again, I would like to see a more blatant transition to help pull the audience through the speech. Note that he cites a good source, a Memphis engineering firm, to argue that the city would sustain many damages in the quake. Note, too, that he uses vivid language to describe the destruction of the city. This language works to paint a clear picture for his listeners so that they can imagine the tragedy and destruction that such an earthquake would cause. Still in main point 3, the speaker provides further concrete details to support his assertion that Memphis is doomed if an earthquake strikes. Note that he names very few specific buildings that have been built to be earthquake-proof. This can help the audience, who's probably familiar with the area, appreciate the severity of the problem, because they are all likely thinking of the other areas, buildings, and landmarks that are not safe. Here, the speaker has transitioned from main point 3 to main point 4, his final main point: what to do to keep yourself safe in the event of an earthquake. Note how he builds a rapport with his audience by putting himself in their shoes, and note how he bolsters his own credibility by referring again to the research he has conducted. Finally, note that he has a handout for his audience, but that he is not going to distribute it until after his speech. This is a great idea, because handing out materials during a speech can be very distracting. Here in main point 4, the speaker does a good job of using chronological organization within his main point to tell people how they can be prepared at all stages of the earthquake. And he does a good job of using specific brief examples throughout this main point to offer explanation to his audience. Again, his use of vivid language and concrete details makes this a particularly memorable paragraph. He continues in chronological order here to tell people how to keep themselves safe after the earthquake is over, and again, he uses good specific examples of behaviors the audience should take. Here, the speaker breaks with his timeline to ask the audience to prepare for the earthquake ahead of time. Again, there is excellent specific detail in this section of the speech, but the speaker should have put this paragraph first in the main point, so as not to disrupt his chronological flow. Now, this paragraph is potentially the most troubling part of the speech. Do you see why? What is the speaker trying to get his audience to do in the paragraph? If you said he's trying to get them to act, you were right. He's calling the audience to action, something that is a hallmark of the persuasive speech. Here, the speaker clearly crosses the line from informative to persuasive speaking. This paragraph does not belong in an informative speech. In the conclusion, the speaker does a good job of summarizing his speech, but we need to look closely at his closing remarks. Do you think he does a good job of bringing the speech to a memorable close? Maybe. The last line about the inventor of the Richter scale is a good one, and it's pretty funny. It does not, however, relate back to the beginning of the speech. The speech would have been more cohesive if the speaker had ended it the same way he began, by talking about the big earthquake that interrupted the World Series. This is clearly an A or a B+ speech. It does a lot of things right. It has good organization, it has excellent introductions, it uses supporting materials well throughout, it has well-delineated main points that have good topic sentences, and it uses really vivid language to appeal to the audience. The speech could also do a couple of things better. First of all, it could have more obvious transitions. This would help pull the listener through the speech. Next, the speech needs to stop short of calling the audience to action, because that is venturing into the realm of the persuasive speech. And finally, the speech needs to end on a stronger note by referring back to the attention-getting device. I hope that after watching this speech analysis presentation, you are inspired to go work on your own speeches.